Hey, what is up, Commanders? It's Fiasco, and we're here with a new game for the channel. We're trying out Supreme Commander Forged Alliance, but this is not the original game that released 14 years ago. This is Forged Alliance Forever, which is an updated, community-driven mod pack that keeps the game current and keeps the game running on modern machinery at 4K resolution, and all the bells and whistles of modern drivers and everything else, and to include a very active community online and a launcher. So the links for all these things will be in the description below. If you have ever played Supreme Commander when it first came out a couple years ago or anytime since then, the game is alive and well, and you should check it out. So we're going to kind of start a new thing here on the channel. In addition to the ultimate general content, we're going to be taking a look at Supreme Commander. So today we have our first match, and this is my first win on the ladder against Smoons, another player. So we'll take a look at the UI for those of you who are new to the game. We'll just try and explain some basic concepts as I go through the overall game. Let's get the camera moving as far as the game's concerned, but I'll go ahead and slow it down a bit so that we don't lose track of what's going on. In the top left over here we have the mini-map. This will just allow you to kind of zoom in, but then still get a good idea of what's happening on the overall battle. And as we take a look at the top right, we have our economy scoreboard. Take a look at who's doing what in terms of their econ. So these green numbers here, this represents mass income. This yellow number here represents energy income, and then this is sort of a total over the course of the entire battle, mass total and all that kind of stuff. This is a good indicator of your economic position within the game. Now, Supreme Commander is built on 4 general resources, 2 of which you see, mass and energy, which are required to build units. For example, I'm building this factory here, and then the units that come out of the factory are going to have a mass cost. In the bottom left of the screen, you can see a T1 engineer costs 52 mass and 260 energy. And so when you generate a resource, you generate that in units per tick or per second. So here's a mass extractor. This is one of the major resource generators in the game. And this generates for me, as you can see in the bottom left here, 2 mass per second at a cost of 2 energy per second. And now I'm building a power generator, which just generates 20 energy per second for free, essentially. Aside from the build cost of the unit itself and the time. The 4th resource is build power. So each factory has the ability to build a certain number of things per second, and you can support that to increase the efficiency of the appropriate factory in terms of its raw build power. But you get the idea. Build power, number of factories, does not scale linearly. In fact, it's kind of an exponential growth. The more factories you have, the faster your economy can snowball. Your commander, this is the sort of your main unit in the game here. When you zoom out, it's the person here. That's his commander, and then this is my commander. So the little person logo, that's kind of your most important piece. Because in Supreme Commander, especially in the online competitive scene, it's basically chess. If you kill the commander, you win. Anybody who played the war game War Machine should probably remember this general rule set. The game, that one is called Assassination. If you kill the king, you win. So we have Smoons is the opponent here. He's playing a UEF, and the UEF is sort of your generic human faction. They're a little slower. They're much tougher than anybody else. They're quite tanky as a faction as a result. And I'm playing Seraphim. And the Seraphim are an invading alien people in this universe. And their general shtick is that they're kind of the Schwerpunkt faction. Or they've been referred to as the Defeat in Detail faction. They have a lot of offense, but typically in a very small amount of space. So you're going to see smaller armies coming out of the Seraphim that do outsized damage, but they don't have a lot of tricks aside from generally that. And their commander, again, my commander here, is abnormally tough. So he's got a small number of hit points at 11,500 in compared to the UEF commander. It starts at 1,200. But the Seraphim commander has access to a number of upgrades that can increase its regeneration or health per second. And the units that the Seraphim produce are a little basic, but they punch above their weight class, which is certainly nice. There are 2 other factions, and as we continue this series, you'll see that there are other factions in play. I'm working on trying to get okay with all of them as I go. So that's the basics of the thing. And then the last resource, again, doesn't show up on the screen anywhere, is your personal ability to pay attention, or actions per minute, or your ability to focus on the situation around you. And one of the things that keeps me down here in the lower brackets, and we'll talk about ratings here in just a second, is the fact that I'm a new player and I still need to focus on decisions that I'm making, and I spend more time thinking about things than maybe I should, or I spend more time planning factory builds than maybe I should. And a better player, like a higher rated player, will just jump into it and know how to make some of those decisions without needing the extra resources. Okay, so let's go ahead and speed up back to full time, or full base game time. What's happening in the game is I am expanding my initial factories by building engineers. Engineers are your primary building unit. You see here in the bottom left of the screen, he has a little wrench icon and 5 next to it. That's the build power of the engineer. So each engineer scales linearly. Additional engineers add their own 5 build power to the pool. You get what I'm going for there. I have 3 engineers down here vacuuming up all these trees. And when they do that, they generate energy from the tree. Like they burn it like they would lumber for energy. I could also pick up these rocks, and that would give me mass. So one of the most important things that you can use your engineers for is to generate economy by getting it off the map. Lastly, let's talk about the UI. You can build power generators pretty much anywhere. You can build mass extractors only on these mass points, which on the map are illustrated by this sort of green upside down U logo. And then the last icon that's important for you as a UI perspective is a place where you can put a hydro, a power generator. This is a unique power generator to these particular parts of the map, and they're just more powerful, better power generators on an efficiency mass per energy tick perspective. They're cheaper to build, but they're roughly the equivalent of 5, I believe, power generators working together in tandem. So I'm rated at -221, and my opponent's rated at -193. So neither one of us is good. We are both beginner players, and this is probably my 11th game on the ladder, where the first 10 games are me just getting stomped by people who were rated much better than me, and that's because the matchmaker was learning where I fit in the grand scheme of things, what my skill is. So we see Smoons' overall strategy was to establish his initial base, and then push and built his 2 factories here right up next to the hydrocarbon power plant. And you see these little blue energy lines coming from the power plant to his factory. What that means is that the factory will now run more efficiently. It will use less power per tick of construction to push out its units than a freestanding factory would. So this factory over here is doing the same thing with a mass extractor. And so you see it's costing him less mass per tick to build units out of that factory. I'm not doing that at all. I've got a bunch of energy that's powering into my factories, but I'm not using the hydro, and I'm not using the mass to efficiently build my units. So there's some room for improvement on my end. So what Smoons is doing is a very aggressive raiding strategy. He's building his factories, and the units are just coming straight out of them and coming right into my base. And my plan was to come down here and establish kind of a secondary production facility away from the obvious place. Remember, I spawned in the map right here, and so did Smoons, opposite me. So my thought process is, he knows where I am, and I know where he is, and so I wanted to build my main production facility somewhere else, so that he might not know exactly where I am without being able to scout me. Consider this is what Smoons can see. So Smoons knows my base is over here, but he knows nothing, for now anyway, about my production facility over there. And similarly, I know very little about what he's got going on, except that he has some buildings in his main base, which is obvious. he's aggressively pushed his commander north to take out my power structure, power facility, and at the moment I don't really have much in the way of a response to it because I have a point defense turret here that's not completed, and it's therefore not shooting anything. And I'm trying to counter his rush, his aggressive push, with my own early units. But my units moving in to attack his commander mean that they're not at the home base to defend against his push on my initial production. My main factory here, my main mass extractors, and my main bank of P-gens, or power generators. My commander is moving to engage his commander, and this is probably, especially on these smaller 1v1 maps, where probably the majority of the action comes from, using your commander aggressively to engage directly. It is, I don't want to be all like it's a big brain strat or anything, but it is better, I think, to engage your commander directly than it is to rely on your units, especially in the early phase of the game. The commander here is roughly the equivalent of 20 of these T1 tanks in terms of combat power. So I should be pushing the commander to attack. And in this situation, I think I've got him, right? He's at a little over half health. I've got units, he doesn't. What I don't know in this fight is that he's got reinforcements and they're coming to help him. So he's moving backwards to go meet his reinforcements, and I'm just walking right into this trap, sort of. But he's also got other units coming from the south, so I'm trying to cut off those reinforcements from this production facility here, and I should have this engineer kind of assisting the construction of more factories, because I'm floating a lot of resources. This blinking plus 22 means that I am not spending all the mass that I have coming in, nor am I spending all the power that I have coming in, which means I have all these resources that I'm generating that I'm not doing anything with, and I'm therefore inefficiently using my economy. Now, in fairness, so is Smoons. He's doing the same, but not nearly as bad as I am. So economy directly translates to productive capacity, and productive capacity is really, I would argue, kind of how you win the game. You can sort of see our battle lines being drawn at this point. I have the lower quarter of the map pretty firmly in my control, but that's only because he's got tunnel vision on my commander. If he was to send even just these 3 units right here to attack down here, I would have no defenses against a push in that direction. I've captured these mexes down here, and I've got my engineers starting to block off this pass with tier 1 PD. But the thing is that tier 1 point defense is great for tanks and raiders, but one single artillery piece, like a Lobo here, would outrange. Let's click on this Lobo. This Lobo has a longer effective fire range than my tier 1 PD does, which means he'd be able to shoot me and I wouldn't be able to shoot back. So it'd be a very ineffective defense, which is why, especially at tier 1, I generally prefer building units rather than defensive structures. Especially because on a map like this, my turret might not be able to shoot down, right? The game does use physics to direct its fire. My turret may not be able to shoot down at the targets moving through here. See, I'm just shooting the hill doing nothing with this turret. But from up top, it looks like a pretty good place for a turret. It looks like a, you know, I'm thinking like, look, that turret more or less covers the entire whole, you know, pass between these 2 mountains, but it doesn't because of the angle of fire and things like that. So Smoons has a pretty consistent stream of units coming in, and he's starting to expand his number of factories that are supporting his aggressive push. He's got 5 right now, plus 1 on the base, and he's got units working on a 6 over here, and just kind of continuing to produce more and more production around. He's also got his engineers over here just reconning my base, I guess, or capturing. Yep, he just captured my mass extractor. So he's just capturing my units, and I'm not even aware of it because I've got so much of my mental energy focused on the fight down here, trying to kill his commander or kill his units or kill his factory, that I'm not aware of the wider fight while this is going on, of the economy or the battle happening at hand. And I'm going to need my commander in there as well. And there's one big thing that I have about this battle that I'm not doing well. So if you're playing Supreme Commander and you hit Control and Shift at the same time, you'll see all the available mass that could be being vacuumed up by your engineers. And this is reclaim. This is a very important concept in this game, because reclaim allows you to sort of kickstart your economy or speed up the productive capacity of your early game economy, which is usually pretty sluggish. Without reclaim, you grow slowly. With reclaim, you can grow in a kind of explosive fashion. So we're basically just throwing units at one another, and he's just building more than I am. He's got more economy than I do, although barely. But he's got way more factories than I do, because I have basically these 4, and then I have this one over here. So I've got 5, and he's at 6 or 7 at this point. And so it's going to start hurting. Now I am realizing that I'm behind the curve. I'm spitting these factories out. The thing is, so is he. Right on my front door almost. Now I'm probably going to be able to get these 3 factories to produce units at a rate that would prevent him from finishing this one factory. But I mean, you know, I don't know that. And then he's got his commander spitting out even more aggressive early factories. So Smoons has a pretty clear strategy of just trying to overwhelm me, basically, in early spam, and it's clearly working. It's clearly working because he's continuing to press into my lines. So what would you do if you were playing on this map and you were me, or what would I do watching kind of after the effect? Well, the first thing I would do is I'd look at all this mass that he's just gifting me, putting on my front door. All these mass, like 41, 41, 41, 29, 29, 29. What does that get me? What could that get me? Well, give me a couple things. First is, if I can pick up 41 mass off of the ground over there in front of me, that's basically a battle tank. The battle tank cost me 51 or 54 mass, or it's most of an artillery piece. Alternatively, it's enough mass on the ground as I could advance to the next tech level. So my land factory could move to tier 2, which would take that factory offline for a minute and 55 seconds unless I reinforced it. But it would only cost, it costs 1,000 mass and it costs 9,000 energy. Well, energy I can produce, I'm producing too much as it is, so I would easily be able to absorb the 79 pips of increased expense on energy to pump this factory up. And I'm sitting on enough mass to do it. Just by vacuuming this up alone would probably be enough to get me to tier 2, let alone all the energy or mass sitting up here. So there's easy ways that I could tick up to tier 2, and then if I was able to do that, I would be able to stick out tier 2 combat units, which would outrange and outdamage their tier 1 equivalents. We'll talk about this more in the second video, where I do successfully manage to tech up to tech 2, and the power differential between tier 1 and tier 2 is much more evident in that battle. Okay, so the one thing that I do here that does save me in this battle is I upgrade my commander to increase the speed and range of his gun. Now speed does not mean the projectile speed. Speed is rate of fire, which means that he was shooting there once every other second. When I finish this upgrade, he'll shoot every second, and that means he's doubling, essentially, his rate of fire. And that will allow him to, if he was equivalent to 20 tanks earlier, he's basically equivalent to 40. Additionally, let's mouse over my commander and look at the bottom left of the screen. You see 2 little sort of yellow star icons underneath the commander's logo. That's pips of veterancy. You earn veterancy in this game by essentially the amount of mass that you've killed. So killing a lot of low value units will get you veterancy slowly, killing a more expensive unit will get you more veterancy quicker, etc., etc. The important part of veterancy, as far as we're concerned, is that it increases both the maximum hit point total, and it also increases your regen per second, which means how much health you get back just every second. So I'm right now regenerating 22 health per second, and as the battle goes on, I'm going to get more and more pips of veterancy, which make me harder and harder and harder to kill, because these tanks, let's take a look at Smoons' tanks. I'm regenerating 20 health a second, and their gun does 24 damage per shot. That means that theoretically, if I was fighting one of these tanks one-on-one, I would, every time they shot me, By the time they shot again, I would have regenerated 22 of the 24 damage they'd done to me. So net, we're looking at a 24, we're looking at a 2 damage per second on these tanks. And I'm kicking out. I'm kicking out 100 damage per second. So it's the sort of thing where this commander can kind of just wade fearlessly, essentially, into combat with these tanks, which is great because he's basically able to kind of hold up a front all by himself at this point. And then our factory here kicks out more and more and more units as we go. So let's go ahead and speed it up and get the general flow of what's happening at this point. Smoons is sending a never-ending stream of units. I've got my factories up here trying to kick out, opening a new front, and trying to close off this lane of advance, because he's sending them up, down, through this gap into my base, and then he's using these factories to try and attack me from the north. And so these units here are attempting to push, take out the factories here, and prevent him from producing new units in this direction. Now, it takes a while before we're able to do this, but we are generally able to get there. We'll go ahead and kick the speed up, because the overall flow of the battle at this point is more or less that. My commander here is continuing to rank up. Now he's at plus 28 health per second, which means one tank is actually negative DPS. It's at minus 4 DPS. One tank alone can shoot me and I cannot respond to it, and I would out-regen its ability to damage me. Now obviously, multiple tanks is a different discussion, but as we kill more and more and more tanks, we get more and more and more veterancy as well. And now we're reducing his ability to produce units because I've managed to get my guys up on his factories. And the motto here is one commander, despite being fairly weak here, one commander is able to really, really outfight all these units. But I've got to keep moving because, again, the game uses physics. And these tanks, they fire rounds in the air, so you can dodge them. Be aware of that too. Create distance, allow that regen to kick off. 28 health per second starts to add up really quick. And you can kind of see the overall flow of the battle. Smoons has opened a new line of production. He's being very good about efficiently utilizing his mexes to keep his tanks producing cheap. Another attack on the commander, really not going to be very effective at hurting him, but it will blow up another factory, which is never gonna be a bad thing. We'll speed it up again. You're getting the overall flow of the battle, the overall feel. One of the things I am doing is I'm starting to upgrade my mass extractors, the ones that are safe in the back, and I'm trying to work on reclaiming here to cover down on my energy demands, because my economy is not doing great, though in fairness, neither is his. So we're both not doing great as far as that's concerned. I'm a little worried about this attack here coming on my base, because it's going to be the kind of thing that would really negatively affect my ability to produce new units and would shut down this whole front. Fortunately, I do have 1 point defense that helps to shut this whole thing down, as well as I do have a block of units up here that can get in and cut off the attack from the rear, and we're able to basically just outproduce it before it shuts down all of our factories. Duelist commented on this video, and he also played the same battle and had some great commentary about it. I do also manage to sneak a group of units into his rear and start taking out production and mexes. So these were over here being produced, and there was a gap in the line, and I was able to sneak them through and get into his rear while at the same time stabilizing the fight up here, although I do lose a factory in the process, and both mexes again, and the PD. So things up there are a bit messy, but they're fixable. I'm working on this nano repair, which would further increase the amount of health I regenerate per second. Additionally, in addition to my veterancy, it would go above and beyond that. Now, Duelist does make the correct point that I am probably not really in danger here, but I overreact, cancel the repair, which means, or not repair, cancel the upgrade, as you can see, which does mean that essentially the points I spent on that upgrade are wasted. Not the points, but the econ. Here I do manage to get into his main base. I take out the majority of his power production, and we'll take a look at how that affects his economy as we go. you'll almost immediately see on the map what this does to his production of units as well. What was a pretty constant stream is starting, although not quite yet, starting to be a slow trickle. We're still looking at a pretty good stream coming in. But now we're going to start to see the ability of his army to produce units negatively affecting. He's starving on mass. He's starting to starve a little bit on power as well. He can't get in there all the way. My commander is now at 4 pips of veterancy, almost up to 5. He's not quite able to just stand there and take it, obviously, but it's able to really absorb a lot of fire and crush. Now I'm trying to drag them back into my point defense. I've got 3 cannons here, which should help thin some of these numbers out. But at this point, I'm really worried about my main factory's dead, and so we're more or less going all in. Now here we go. Take a look at. Remember the stream you saw earlier? Look at the trickle. Look at the tiny trickle of units. This is 5, 5, 5. There's these huge blocks of space in between the available units. And as we close in on the final moments of the battle, it's coming down to those numbers got thinned out enough that he just can't keep up in terms of productive capacity. And we're getting down to the final showdown, and there's no more production coming from the north, so there's just these blocks of like 8 at a time that are more than enough. Like the commander here can easily handle 8 tanks, no problem. He's able to regen through it, not an issue. And his commander's unupgraded, so he can't really out-damage me either. And I'm able to heal through whatever damage he's doing. So I probably should just stand here and fight this, honestly. But again, I'm a newer player, and I don't know that I can just take that fight. So instead of grinding it out, and now I do just kind of grind it out because I realize I out-DPS him, and I'm also out-repairing his ability to damage me, while at the same time, his production up here is gone, and so therefore these units can just stream down, and I say, hey, it's been a great game. And we wrap it up. So that was my first win on the ladder, and Smoons was a phenomenal opponent. Really had me in the back of my seat the entire time, or edge of my seat the entire time. And I've actually had a couple of custom games with Smoons as well, and he's continued to be a great opponent. And just like me, we're both learning, we're both newer. This was a great strategy, and honestly, I learned a lot of lessons from this battle. Also, I learned a lot of lessons from watching Smoons in this fight, because I think he's onto something, right? Like, this amount of spam is just very difficult for a beginner army to respond to. Again, though, there are lots of things I could be doing. Look at all of this mass. I didn't reclaim any of it, and it would have allowed me to tech up into Tech 2, or it would have allowed me to afford the improved regen on my commander, so I go full Battlecom. And as we continue to play these series of games, you'll learn that I'm quite fond of Battlecom. So turning your commander into a tough combatant and then leading the charge with a bunch of supporting units in tow is definitely one of the things that I like to do. And that's, yeah. So stay tuned. We'll continue making Ultimate General content on this channel, but we're also going to be producing Forged Alliance content, Forged Alliance Forever. So again, take a look in the comments or in the description, and I'll have all the stuff on the FAF launcher. And the game goes on sale pretty frequently, so if this game holds any interest to you whatsoever, do check it out. There's a living community who is very excited to play with you online, and look me up. Talk to you guys soon. This is Fiasco saying I'll see you next time, and until then, good luck on the field. Bye.